Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap. It's a beautiful day and I'm just on my way out in the woods to have a look around, see what's happening out there, check out the trails, that sort of thing. And I thought I'd do a video on a very common problem that people have when they're going out in the actual bush. I'm not talking about walking trails that are prepared and maintained. I mean when you're going in the woods, okay? This is a problem for novices. Also when you're bringing kids along and that sort of thing. It can really slow you down and irritate you. And that is getting, you know, stick when you're walking through the woods, especially when you're pushing through and that sort of thing. You get all kinds of sticks and twigs and pine needles and all that sort of stuff down in your boots. Also, when the snow's deep enough, you start getting snow in your boots. Or even if the snow isn't that deep, if you're pushing through evergreen trees where there's all kinds of snow on the branches like today, all that snow goes down into your boots. So how do you deal with it? I'm going to show you two ways to deal with that. And different contingencies depending on the kind of boots you're wearing. Okay, so let me bring you in closer to show you what I got on my feet today. Okay, so today I've got these kind of lace-up boots. These are insulated and they're warm. They're not steel toe or nothing, but they're very warm. I like them when it's around -10. Once it gets to -20, these are too cold. But they're fine for a -10, which is around the temperature today. So when you have a boot like this, the simplest thing to do, or even if you have a boot like this, okay, this is just a high-sided rubber. This is insulated, but I find these are only good around 0 degrees Celsius, just around freezing. Once it starts getting below -3, -4, I find my toes getting a bit cold in these, although that is also possibly because I find them a bit snug. Anyway, if you got boots like this or boots like this, the easiest thing to do, especially handy in the winter months, you got some long johns on, right? And you just have a pair of pants that are big and baggy over the long johns, or you just wear 2 pairs of pants. But the outer pants have to be big and baggy, and they have to come down below the top of the boots. This sounds really simple, but a lot of people don't know this. All right, so if you're walking around like this, all the sticks, they just shed right off. Okay, and this bottom area might get a bit damp, but that's okay, right? Because you put a layer underneath and you got your socks tucked in and all that sort of stuff. This system is really good in the fall and spring when you're wearing high rubber boots. At least where I live, it's very wet and boggy, and we don't really wear hiking shoes in the woods. I mean, people do it on hiking trails, but if you're actually in the bush, hiking shoes are a real liability around here. You got to wear something waterproof, something high, especially if you're fishing or exploring new territory. You got to go through some bogs and stuff like that. You never know when you're sinking up to your knees. So when you have a boot like this, you can see it comes up very high into the pants, right? And that's also why when you have a boot like this, you want to have a layer underneath, a long john or something even thinner than a long john, just something, because you don't want this rubbing against your skin. It'll chafe. Over time, it'll be very uncomfortable. Right, so you have to have a layer underneath. Even, you know, nylons or something like that would be fine, or if you could find them to fit you, right? But you know, really thin long john or something like that. These are for skiing, I think. It's fine. So this system works really good if you've got a nice high boot like this, right? Otherwise, with something like this, it's iffy because, you know, something could happen. This could get pushed up, and all of a sudden I start getting snow and sticks down there, right? So let me show you how to solve that problem, especially if you're in deep snow or you know you're going to be doing a lot of bushwhacking. This is good, but there's an upgrade. Or if it's you know, spring, early fall, or late spring or summer, and it's really hot, and you don't want to have 2 layers like this, right? Where I've got basically long johns and pants, or just 2 pairs of pants. Maybe it's too hot for that, right? So how do you get around that? All right, so when you got this sort of situation, what you want to do is buy a pair of these. They're called gators, okay? It's just a nylon, usually nylon. There's lots of, in the old days it would have been canvas or leather, but they just wrap around here. They have a little hook, and the purpose of that is to hook. That hook hooks right into your laces, right down there. Right, so they won't come up while you're walking. Right, you put it on somewhere down there. See, that's on my laces now. This just goes all the way around right? This one Velcros on and it zips up. Okay, so it's got a zipper, but then it's got Velcro to keep snow and ice out of the zipper. If you're going through a lot of snow, especially on a wet day, all that snow can ice up your zipper really bad, right? But this is a great thing out. So now you're really covered, right? Very little, you know, there's very little bush you're going to go through that's above this, although it can happen. But then you've still got your pant leg over your boot to keep things out. It also keeps you extra warm and that sort of stuff. Right, but this way when you're pushing through the snow and pushing through everything, you're not going to get snow down your boots. You're not going to get sticks and pine needles down your boots. Okay, if you got boots like this, the gator really doesn't work because there's nothing for it to hook onto, and it'll just ride up. But when you got high rubber boots like this, you really don't need the gator if you've got your pants hanging down over, because there's just such a big distance, right? These come up almost, they don't come up as high as the gators. The gators give me an extra 4 inches, but these come up so high, and the pant leg comes down. These come up so high, and the pant leg goes down so far, right? This works really well, except in deep snow. If you got a boot like this, and you got your pants over them, and you're in deep snow, a simple solution is to just, I haven't got these boots on right now, but you tie the pant leg around the boot down here. You know, some rubber inner tube or something like that, or even just with string, something that'll work. You put a loop underneath your heel, and then tie them on. It's too cold for me to work my hands today. It's around -10, but yeah, if you're walking in the woods, you know, you put a paracord or something like that, you just hook it under that space there. It's not going to wear thin in a day. So you have a rope going underneath, and you just tie the pants on, right? And that'll keep the knot you've made from riding up, right? You tie it on nice and tight. It can't go down because the boot gets wider as you go down, right? So that's another solution. I guess I should have done that in a video too. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that, but you get the idea, right? Just in my garage here, I thought I'd give you an idea of that sort of improvised gator. This is just using a towel, right? You can use anything. You know, when it's cold, if it's wet, you'd have to use something water resistant. But when it's really cold, below freezing, you're just trying to keep stuff out. You know, waterproof doesn't matter. So it's just an old towel. You could use anything. And some old canvas is sort of ideal. You can get that drop cloth canvas at the dollar store. That stuff's cheap, much cheaper than, you know, a set of gators about 30 bucks. They're pretty cheap. But, you know, let's say we're doing this last minute, you want to improvise something like this. You can see how I have it on, right? If you tie it on right, it'll stay on. And you can always adjust it as you get moving. Let me show you how I put this on. Okay, hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. This is, how much rope do I got here? I have about almost 10 feet of paracord, okay? So you get something that you know is going to go from the bend here almost up to your knee, right? Higher the better, but not above your knee. Okay, and you just take the corner, trap it down under your laces. Okay, like that. That's just to hold it in place. Okay, and you get it. Get your pants down nice and tight. You wrap that around. You want the free end to be behind. You don't want that to be in front because it'll grab all kinds of things as you're walking. You want that the final end part to be beside or behind, but facing back, right? So it doesn't grab things. Okay. Now you figure out roughly where make this even. Right, I got it spaced out so it's even. Loop the end under your heel. Bring it up like that. And bring it down nice and tight around your boot. Not above your boot, but around your boot. This is for a leather boot, right? Not really necessary for a rubber boot. As long as your pants are down over it, you're fine. And over again, you want to go nice and snug. Don't worry about being a bit tight. It'll just gradually, find slack as you're walking. An extra wrap would be even better. I'd love to have this go around again So maybe even 12 or 13 or 14 feet. This is good enough. But you want the final wrap to be as high up on your calf as possible, right? So it doesn't slip down. Okay, so you bring it up as high as you can. Bring that bottom part up as high as you can so it's sort of around the top of your calf. Okay. Then you can just make a reef knot type thing here. You know, whatever works. You don't want to have too many loops here. The more loops, the more things grab. Right, so I could tie it like a, that's a reef knot there. So I could, whoops. Yeah, it's a reef knot. So I could do a reef knot. That'll still come undone if I want it undone. Right, that way you don't have a loop. Because if you have a loop, it'll grab stuff. If you have to have a loop, it's not the end of the world, right? But maybe just have one loop. Like a reef knot with a loop. Okay, so if I did that, it would look like this. Okay, so I have a loop here. I could pull that loop out and tuck it underneath like that. Right, tuck that underneath. That's not a bad approach to doing it. Okay, just to keep that from grabbing stuff. But that'll work, right? And the more wraps you have, the better. I'm just showing you the general principle, right? If you ever look at some really old footage of northern people, they actually have something like this with skins, right? That's the basic idea. Also, you know, if you're not good with knots and you're feeling lazy, you can just duct tape this on, right? But this is like an improvised gator. This will work as long as you have the knot on the top high enough that it's above your calf. If it's at the very thickest part of your calf, it'll just slide down, right? Unless you tie it so tight it cuts off your circulation. But you can go pretty snug with this because you got so much in between. And as long as the top knot here, ideally you have a couple more wraps around it, and it's above your calf a little bit, so it can't slide down. It'll stay up. It'll stay on down here, right? And this won't, you know, because you've got it around here, won't ride up, right? You're holding it in place that way. And that won't wear out because you're not walking on that, or you're walking, all the stress is going on here. You're not really walking on that part. So it's certainly last a few days like that. Okay, that's how you do that. So yeah, those are solutions to keeping sticks and snow out of your boots. Long, wide pants over the top, or nice set of gators, great solution. You can get these for like 15 bucks on Amazon. They've got some really expensive ones, but they also have some pretty cheap ones. And unless you're like, you know, outdoors all the time as a forestry worker or something like that, but if you're the kind of person that just gets out a few weekends a year, a cheap one of these will last you maybe a couple decades, right? Depending on what kind of use they're getting. So they're worth the money, especially worth the money if you're taking kids or teenagers out in the woods and they're getting all irritated and they're not enjoying themselves. You want them to enjoy themselves, so they'll develop that lifelong love of getting out there and exploring the wilderness. All right, so just a couple tips for keeping snow and sticks and pine needles out of your boots. It's not that complicated. There's lots of ways around it. I guess the fourth way, duct tape it on, right? That also works. That's a quick solution in a pinch, right? Just put some rags around there and duct tape it all on. As long as you're not taking your boots off, that's a good solution too. I mean, if you're only getting out a few times a year, that's fine too. All right, so I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.